Welcome back to the panel discussion, Cybersecurity Game Changer, Real-Time Stream Processing in Government, sponsored by TIBCO on federalnewsradio.com and 1500 AM. I'm your host, Jason Miller. Our guests today are Barron-DiCamillo, the Director of the U.S. Computer Emergency Readiness Team, or U.S. CERT, at the Homeland Security Department, Jeff Wagner, the Director of IT Security for the Office of Personnel Management, and Mark Palmer, Senior Vice President for Integration and Event Processing at TIBCO. Now, before break, we started to talk about this idea of CDM, Continuous Diagnostics and Mitigation. We talked a little bit about the idea of fast data. I tried to stay out of it, Mark, but you brought me right into the regular term. But one comment that was made was, once you kind of understand where you've been and where you maybe need to go and what is the normal, whatever we can get to normal means, then you can really make the case for how the analytics work and the impact that they can have. But then it kind of occurred to me, what about the mission side? Because eventually you're going to have to explain to the mission, the business owners, why you're doing certain things. So let me turn to Jeff to start with, since you're our representative of really the agency level to deal with the mission owners. How do analytics help you kind of make that case that this is why we need to do what we need to do from a security standpoint? It's a loaded question.
It is a loaded question. It's kind of a trick question. But the big thing for me is, actually, that's the part that excites me, because in the past it's been one of those things where business has always tried to trump security. It's always been a head-to-head fight between business and security. With the mapping of things and the behavior analysis and the real-time analytics and all that, now I can tell business, you do what you need to do within certain realms. Obviously, there's going to be some requirements or rules, but business, you do what you need to do, and I'm going to watch what you do, and then that way I can notice when things go wrong. It's actually given us the ability to stop the head-to-head competition between business and security, and actually start to work in a way in which we can encourage innovation, encourage business, encourage better models or better tracking of things. So it's really helped us produce a more efficient, better working relationship with the business programs. But at the same time, it's also created an openness in which before business used to hide all the cool things they were doing, and then we were surprised when something happened and went, "When did you guys do that?" "Oh, we did it. We just didn't tell you." So it's actually helped us create an open relationship.
I think we're entering the ultimate era of the revenge of the nerd, because every industry is turning toward being more quant-based, more mathematics-based. We were kind of arguing our love or hate thereof of math. But you even look at baseball, right? Moneyball. What is all that about? That is about applying statistical analysis to optimizing how well you do in a game. So certainly from a cybersecurity perspective, obviously the stakes are much higher. So I think that business leaders now are really acutely aware of this, because it touches them on such a personal level as well. And I find so much less resistance to the idea that those analytics are essential in terms of making decisions than it was 10 years ago, because it's now in the popular mindset, I think, much more.
And I would just add, I think from the last 18 months, we called 2014 the year of breaches, because of the visibility associated with these large data breaches that are happening now on almost a daily basis. Because the reputational risk associated with what we're seeing from a cyber perspective, when they're not prioritizing, the business decisions are being prioritized over the security implications of those business decisions. We're seeing a trend, a big change in the C-suite level across critical infrastructure and the departments and agencies, that they are taking this much more seriously, and they are putting in security processes, cybersecurity processes into those business decisions to ensure that they are, that it's not just something you're going to bolt on at the very end anymore. That's no longer acceptable a practice. And sadly, it had to happen through some very visible breaches that caused a lot of reputational risk, and a lot of people lost their jobs and worse associated with that. But I think we're seeing a huge trend and change in getting the right kind of emphasis between the business units and the cybersecurity folks in working closer together, as Jeff and Mark stated.
One firm on Wall Street, Knight Capital, lost $440 million in 40 minutes on one trading day about 2 years ago, and that changed everything. As to your point about, unfortunately, those are the things that spur action. But,
From the business perspective, Jeff, I think your example of it's creating a new type of relationship, is it because the analytics can, in some ways, help you explain to them why certain things are being done, why certain standards are being met, why you're giving them a set of parameters instead of, opening the floodgates and letting them walk through? Is that what analytics, that's maybe an unintended benefit?
The breaches that Ann pointed out are the stick. I mean, it really is. It's become the stick. I mean, and in the past, you know, IT security folks were seen as the naysayers walking around with the soup sign, you know, the guy with the fluffy beard saying that the end is near, you know, and they never believed us because what, you know, who's ever been punished by it, you know, and everybody would throw up, oh, VA. Well, VA was you know, that huge incident years ago. Now it's, I mean, and then it started rolling in a domino effect. I mean, it started with Target and then Home Depot, and I mean, it just kind of started hitting even harder and harder and harder, and more people are being affected. And so I don't really need to, you know, be the naysayer with a big stick that never hits a target, and now you have the targets to do that. The analytics allow me to turn to them and say, hey, look, you guys want to do business. I don't mind you doing business, but I'm trying to keep you from having bad things happen. So I need you to at least do business in this manner so I can watch it, or I can map it, or I can put things in place, checkpoints in place to prevent bad things from happening. I don't have to be the naysayer anymore. The analytics just gives me the capability to give them the option of doing business in an innovative way. Where when in the past we had simply defense in depth type initiatives, and you had very confined requirements that business had to function in. And if they had to go outside that box, and since a lot of major federal agencies are public facing and public serving, we're not just serving, you know, DOD, just military. They can put huge control blocks around because I don't have to provide services for an elderly person, or provide services for somebody out in the middle of nowhere that doesn't have broadband or things of that nature. So the analytics gives us the capability of putting controls in place, putting things in place in a not so perfect security world.
Let me switch gears here for a second, because when we talk about the mission side, we're also talking a little bit about the impact of data analytics on the cybersecurity more generally. And one of the things that came up is the idea of the workforce. And I think, Mark, you mentioned the data scientists and those types of people that you need to help understand, because now you're looking at two short skills, you know, cybersecurity and data. Let me turn to Ann first, because you guys at DHS are always looking to hire more people, it seems like. Give me a sense of how are you finding the right people to start with, and what do you do?
Great question. I think this is why I'm gainfully employed, is always trying to find the hiring manager aspect of my job is all consuming. And so it's a full-time job just to constantly be recruiting and create that pipeline of cybersecurity professionals. And it's not just something that we can focus on in the government. I know at DHS we have a number of initiatives where we're partnering across other federal departments and agencies through scholarship for service programs, where actually university students that are in these programs can actually get stipends and paid internships where they can come and work for departments and agencies that are part of this program. So we're investing in that as a department, and I have a number of SFS students that have come and work for me, and it's a great program to try to engage the millennials in cybersecurity. There's a great study that Raytheon did about millennials, and it was focused on getting them engaged in the STEM kinds of programs. And one of the questions they asked was, would you be interested in working in cybersecurity? 25% of them said yes. When you change that to, would you be interested in securing the internet? 65% said yes. So I think there's some aspect of being an evangelist to help demystify what cybersecurity is also part of what we're trying to focus on, and trying to ensure that this larger community out there knows that there's all kinds of aspects of cybersecurity that they can be engaged in. But I think getting back to the question you said about data scientists and other really high-level, high-functioning type cybersecurity positions is difficult, because we're just not graduating enough folks out of universities that have the STEM education. I was talking during a break about the weekly reader. My fifth grader came home with us during Cybersecurity Awareness Month last October. Didn't know it still existed. And it stated that by the year 2020, there will be 1.4 million jobs in cybersecurity and computer science and only 400,000 available applicants. And so I think as an industry and as this is a global problem, you know, in our international outreach, this is something that our international partners are also facing, is trying to incentivize the STEM curriculum, even at younger ages than the college level, and getting into elementary schools and into junior high.
Jeff, when you guys are looking at fulfilling the cybersecurity positions that you have open, and you're looking to add more people beyond whether it's contractors or even full-time equivalency within the government, are you finding that people are coming to you with, well, they know how to secure the network, but do they know how to analyze the data, or they know how to analyze the data, but they don't necessarily understand the security side? Are you finding the mesh of the two?
It's getting incredibly difficult because I've said before that we're moving more into an insider threat type analytics, and the two worlds have never really collided before. So it is very difficult to try to find somebody that's had that kind of experience of either doing IT or doing some sort of insider threat intelligence type activity. Business analytics is a very difficult type field, and a lot of our tools, most of the employers for our tool sets and our some of our best sensors, they're all mathematicians. They're not actual IT scientists. They're all mathematicians to create these algorithms, and some of these algorithms are just mind-blowing. I mean, Stephen Hawking would enjoy reading them once in a while. So it's become exceedingly difficult to find people that have the capability to do some of the stuff we're doing.
And from, Mark, your perspective, when you guys are trying to support the federal government and other clients, what do you do? How do you guys address the workforce issue to make sure you're bringing in the right skill sets?
Yeah, I think there's three areas that are interesting here. The first is from a leadership perspective. I wonder if we're painting a little bit too rosy a picture of the enlightenment of business leaders about this mathematics, the loveliness of mathematics, as Jeff was saying. Because I think there's still, although I think people generally recognize that it's a big factor, they just don't get it yet. I mean, this is why, general managers in baseball get fired for young whiz kids that have mathematics degrees, like I've been from Boston.
Second baseball reference I just want to point out, guys.
Thank you very much. Just trying to keep it in season. Yeah, in season, that's right. So I think there's actually a really big obstacle there. I think that I think will take a decade or more to flesh out, because new leaders I'm finding in sort of both in the government and also in commercial are really kind of coming with a different type of background and orientation, where it's natural for them to accept math as a basis for making business decisions. So that's one element. The other element is just the scarcity. I mean, you talk about the numbers. I mean, the cost associated with getting this kind of workforce is dramatic. I mean, even at TIPCO, it's not uncommon for us to have a undergrad mathematics major to come out. We offer them a job for $130,000, $140,000, $150,000 a year, and they don't take it with zero experience, right? From some of the top schools, because Silicon Valley, these are the most precious resources. Even so, you're talking about recruiting them into the right conditions, because these people have the pick of what they want to do. So to your point, what's most interesting to them is that's a big point. And then the third, I think technologically, though, I think what's interesting is one of the ways that you mitigate it is actually through creating more leverageable best practices and technologies that you can distribute through the open source community. And that's one of the things we're working on as a company, which is some of these things like finding out that when the temperature goes up 20 degrees on an oil well, then we should pay attention to it. That's really not something that you have to, it's not a closely guarded secret. So we can share those things in an open way and actually leave sort of the high-end math to the people that are more scarce in the first place. So there's technology associated with that. There's leveraging of open standards and open source distribution of code and ecosystems.
Back to the 80-20 rule. You want to automate 80% of the work, so your limited resources can focus on the 20% of difficult problems. And so, I think within that ratio is really applicable when you're talking about, the idea for incident response engagements that 85% of the things we're responding to could be affected by 4 controls. That is completely inappropriate. We would love to change that. We would love to have these scarce cyber resources focus on the really hard, advanced, persistent threats instead of something that was breached because they didn't apply a patch. And so trying to change that, at multiple levels, because those resources, they want to do the cool, hot, exciting, new kinds of capabilities. They want to kind of focus on the engagements where, well, they didn't, apply this patch, or they didn't, they clicked on a spearfish. These things we want to try to eliminate so that these resources have an opportunity to focus on the really hard, advanced problems.
We started the conversation off asking how you're using it. We talked about future programs like DHS's CDM. Jeff, let me just begin with you. About 20 seconds, tell us where OPM is heading with data analytics. If we have this conversation a year from now, where are you going to be?
You will see a lot more automation. Not only automation, but there will be a lot of efficiencies in the fact that all my alerting, all my sensors, all my pieces will actually be in an orchestration unit to do as much efficiency automation as possible. The other thing is instead of being defensive, we're moving more towards approach of having our teams be on the hunt. We're going to be constantly hunting for that vulnerability or hunting for that threat instead of the other way around. Before, we used to just focus on securing the walls and being a beaver building a dam. We're going to go a little bit more on the wolf pack type approach and start actually hunting for the badness before it even gets a chance to get in the door. That's going to be probably the biggest change you'll see, is moving almost completely away from defense to attack.
All right, the Wolfpack mentality, good way to end it. That's all the time we have for today. You've been listening to the panel discussion, Cybersecurity Game Changer, Real-Time Stream Processing in Government, sponsored by TIBCO on federalnewsradio.com and 1500 AM. I'm your host, Jason Miller. I'd like to thank our guests for their insights and conversation, and Barron-DiCamillo, the director of the U.S. Computer Emergency Readiness Team, or U.S. CERT, at the Homeland Security Department, Jeff Wagner, the director of IT Security for the Office of Personnel Management, and Mark Palmer, the Senior Vice President for Integration and Event Processing at TIBCO. For more information on this panel, please visit federalnewsradio.com and search TIBCO.
On behalf of TIBCO, thank you for joining our discussion. We'll have the archive from this session available shortly, and a link will be sent to you to share with your colleagues. Those of you who have requested a training certificate will receive an email with download instructions immediately following the webinar. This concludes today's webinar. Thank you.